All right, let's get right into it. We're going to explore something pretty surprising today. A huge, nationwide women's strike that happened in Iceland. Yeah, the same Iceland that's famous for being a feminist paradise. And it turns out that's a really fascinating paradox. So that's the big question, right? Why on earth would the country that's considered the absolute best in the world for gender equality suddenly just stop? We're talking about their first full-day women's strike in almost half a century. Something's clearly going on here.
And this was their rallying cry. You call this equality? It's such a powerful question. And you have to understand this was not a small protest. We're talking up to 90% of Icelandic women and non-binary people walking away from their jobs. And that includes all the unpaid work at home, too. The country basically shut down.
Okay, so to really get why this was such a shock, you first have to understand Iceland's reputation. I mean, on paper, they are the undisputed heavyweight champion of gender equality. And I mean that literally. For 14 years in a row, the World Economic Forum has ranked Iceland as #1 for gender equality. 14 years. No one else is even in the same league.
And you can see why. They've got a female prime minister, Katrín Jakobsdóttir, who, get this, actually joined the strike herself. Half of her cabinet is made up of women. Education is almost perfectly equal. And let's not forget, way back in 1980, they elected the world's very first Democratic female president. It looks like a perfect report card.
But if you scratch just a little bit beneath that perfect shiny surface, you start to see the cracks. You start to see the issues that brought an entire nation to a standstill. Because the reality for many people tells a very, very different story.
And here is the paradox in black and white. How can a country be #1 for gender equality, but at the same time have a wage gap that hits 21% in some jobs? And even more shocking, a reality where 40% of women will face gender-based violence. The numbers just don't seem to add up.
So let's dig into the specifics. It's not just about that wage gap. A study from the University of Iceland found that 1 in every 4 women there has been raped or sexually assaulted. And on top of that, jobs traditionally done by women, think caregiving, cleaning, they're just systematically paid less and valued less by society. This kind of massive protest, it's not actually new for Iceland. In fact, it's part of this incredible legacy of activism, a tradition that has forced real, concrete change to happen before. Just look at this timeline. You can draw a direct line from action to results. Back in '75, the first Women's Day Off paralyzed the country. Just 5 years later, they elect Vigdís Finnbogadóttir as president. Fast forward to 2018, they pass a groundbreaking law that makes equal pay mandatory. So this 2023 strike, it's the next logical step in this long and pretty effective fight. And here's a fantastic little story that shows you just how big of an impact that first strike had. It famously caused a countrywide sausage shortage. Why? Because thousands of dads, suddenly responsible for feeding the kids, all rushed out to buy the easiest thing they knew how to cook. It was a hilarious but also powerful wake-up call about all that invisible work women do.
This quote, wow, this tells you everything. After Vigdís was elected, a little boy in Iceland saw Ronald Reagan win the US presidency on TV and was totally confused. He said, "He can't be president, he's a man." That's how deeply that 1975 strike changed the culture. It literally reshaped what a whole generation thought was normal.
So, this all leads us to a much deeper, more complicated question. If Iceland has done so much right, why do these problems still exist? What are the hidden, systemic issues that are so hard to get rid of?
Well, there's actually a name for this. It's called the Nordic paradox. It's this strange phenomenon where the countries that are the most equal on paper also have some of the highest reported rates of violence against women. Now, experts say this might not be what it looks like. It could actually be a sign that in these more open societies, women feel safer and more empowered to come forward and report these crimes.
And what about that pay gap? Let's put it in perspective. That 21% gap that sparked the strike is, believe it or not, still better than the gap in the US, which is around 26%, or in India at 36%. So even though Iceland is leading the pack, they're still facing a problem that is, quite frankly, global. Now, it's really important to say that while everyone agrees these gaps exist, not everyone agrees on why they exist or what to do about them. And when you talk about things like pay gaps or why some jobs have more men than women, the debate gets pretty complex. For instance, you have thinkers like psychologist Jordan Peterson, who push back against things like hiring quotas.
His argument is that, on average, men and women tend to be drawn to different careers. So, in a field like engineering, where the pool of female candidates is smaller, he argues that forcing a strict 50-50 hiring rule would mean you'd have to lower the standards for quality. So, what's the big takeaway here? I don't think it's that Iceland has failed. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe Iceland has solved all the easy problems, the ones you can fix with laws. And now they've reached the final frontier of equality, the messy, deep-seated cultural biases that are way harder to see and even harder to change.
And that really leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? If the country that's #1 in the world still has to shut itself down to fight for basic value and safety for its women, what does the finish line even look like? What is true equality? And is that a place we can ever actually get to?